Hello again and welcome to my TBRR video. So rather than my to be read list, this is my to be reread list. Is that a thing? I don't know if this is a thing. I think it should be a thing. And while my TBR has about 100 books on, possibly more, my TBRR is much shorter. However, I get very little time to reread books because I spend so much time reading new books, but there are a few that I would really like to reread at some point in the near future, so I will tell you about them now. Top of my to be reread list is Mansfield Park by Jane Austen, which I've actually just started rereading, so I should finish that in the next month. I decided about 6 months ago that I wanted to reread all of Jane Austen, and this is the last one, and then I will have reread all of Jane Austen in the last year. I saved one of the best till last because this is my second favourite, and I think it's a beautiful book with one of my favourite Austen characters in, and just, it's great. I'm excited. The next book I want to reread is Barnaby Rudge by Charles Dickens. I have read this. Don't remember anything. I read it when I was about 14, 15, so quite a while ago, and I remember nothing. I love Charles Dickens, as I have said many times. Too many, considering how few videos I've made. Too many times. But anyway, Barnaby Rudge, I remember it starts in a pub, there's a raven, and there's a guy called Barnaby Rudge. About all I remember. I know it's set a bit earlier than some of his other novels, rather than being set during Dickens' lifetime. It's set in the 1780s and 90s, and it's about riots that went on in London at the time. I remember nothing from this book at all. I don't know what happened, it's just vanished from my brain, so yeah. Gonna reread that one. Next on my reread list is The Butterfly Lion by Michael Morpurgo. This will not take me very long at all, obviously, because it's a kid's book and the writing is massive and it's tiny, but this was my favourite book until I was about 11, 10, so when I was really young I absolutely loved it. And again, I don't remember really what happens at all, but I know that I loved it, so I would like to reread it again. The next book I'd like to reread is The House at the Riverton by Kate Morton. I read this ages ago when I was about 14 and really loved it. I do remember quite a lot of what happens in it, and I remember that at the time it was one of my favourite books, but I've kind of forgotten about it and it's kind of slipped out of my favourite lists because I haven't read it for so long. It's a great book. It slips in time between the 1920s and the 1990s. I love historical fiction, but what I especially like is fiction that takes place in two times. I always really enjoy that. It's kind of a family saga mystery thing. And the woman who's telling the story in the 90s, when she is about 98 years old, she was a servant in this house at the Riverton when she was a girl, and it's just such a great book. It's one of those books where it's really, really good, and then this little tiny thing happens near the end that makes it brilliant. Not even a big thing to do with the plot, just a small, brilliant detail that suddenly turns it from a really good book into a just fabulous book, and yeah, really need to reread it. Need to remember how lovely it is. I would also love to reread The Book Thief by Marcus the Cap. I think this is talked about on BookTube a fair amount. It's brilliant, and obviously it's narrated by Death, which is quite cool. It's been so long since I read it, and I know I really enjoyed it at the time, and I think I would get even more of it out of a second read now that I'm a bit older. I also want to reread To Kill a Mockingbird. I studied this at school, so I know it really well, even though I read it a long time ago, but I would like to reread it before Go Set a Watchman comes out, just to refresh my memory and kind of remember all the details and get into that frame of mind. I think that would be really good. I want to reread Life of Pi by Jan Martel. I don't have the hard copy of this book because I lent it to someone who lent it to someone and then I never got it back. But I love Life of Pi. I thought it was brilliant. It's really well structured, and I liked that the kind of main event in the body of the book doesn't start for quite a while, but it doesn't really matter. It's such a great premise. Boy on a boat with a tiger, what more could you want? Yeah, it's great. I think Life of Pi was one of the first kind of adult books that I picked up when I was about 13 or 14, and I just absolutely loved it, so I would like to reread that again. The next thing I would like to reread is A Dance to the Music of Time, a series by Anthony Powell. A Dance to the Music of Time is my favourite book series ever, probably my third favourite literary work of all time. It's just brilliant. These books were written between the 1950s and the 1970s, and they're set between the 1920s and the 1970s. They span this one man's life, Nick Jenkins, but the books aren't really ever about him, they're just about all the people he meets, which I really liked. It's a really interesting narrative device. The books are a bit like Evelyn Waugh crossed with Charles Dickens. I love them, but I've only read them once, and I really want to read them again, but there are 12 books, so it's going to take me quite a while. The next thing on my TBRR is all of the Harry Potter series. Don't know when I'm going to get the chance to do that. Like most people my age, I loved Harry Potter as a kid and as a teenager, and I think they're brilliant. I reread the first 6 before the 7th one came out, but that was in 2007. Which is weird. I just looked that up in the book and I can't believe it's been so long since Harry Potter ended. That's 8 years. That's really odd. So I haven't read Harry Potter in a long time, and I would like to, because they're great. Me and the friends I lived with during my undergrad degree were all very into Harry Potter, so we used to talk about Harry Potter a lot. So I've got to the stage now where I feel I know the world and the characters so much better than I know the actual book, which is odd. So I think I'm probably due for a reread. So that's my TBRR, my list of books that I would like to reread. I don't know when on earth I will get to reread most of them, but this is a promise that at some point in the next 3 years, I will reread all of them. Possibly. I love rereading books. I really love it. It's not more enjoyable than reading books for the first time, but I find as much pleasure in it. It's really lovely to read a book and know what's coming. And you get to see all these little things that you might have missed the first time when you didn't know what was happening. You get to revisit all these characters you love, and it's just great. And I wish I had more time to reread books, but there are so many more books to be read. It's just so many books and so little time.